Chapter 32. We've been going through the life of Jacob lately. Well, we've been going through the whole book. But we've gone through the life of Jacob last time we were here. And we started to see what kind of person Jacob is. He's a deceiver. He's a tricker. He's a manipulator. And that's how he's gone through his whole life. And yet God has assigned him as the recipient of the promise that God gave through Abraham and then Isaac and now Jacob. And so Jacob inherits that promise even though he's a rascally, deceptive, lying, sneaky, not nice guy. And he's gone through his life that way. He tricked his brother out of the birthright. He tricked his brother out of the blessing by lying and deceiving both his father and his brother. Then he goes and he runs away from his brother who wants to kill him. He runs to his uncle's house. And he gets deceived himself with the whole wife thing, he marries the wrong wife, thanks to some amazing, the best sleight of hand ever in human history has to be, because he gets set up and marries the wrong woman. His wives pick up on the same thing, and they're lying and manipulating each other for children in their husband's favor. The uncle and Jacob are lying and deceiving back and forth for wealth as far as the spots and the speckled sheep and the goats and everything, and they're tricking each other, and one's stealing sheep from the other, and the other's selective breeding, what he thinks is selective breeding, to make his own flocks better. And then they run away. Jacob runs away from the family, and Laban tracks him down, and they're fighting back and forth and say, you stay on your side and I'll stay on my side because I don't ever want to see you again, and God's going to keep his eye on you, and no, God's going to keep his eye on you, and we better not ever meet again in the middle, that type of thing. Rachel, the wife, steals the family gods, all the idols that Laban has, and she takes them with her. Laban is upset, and she's lying and deceiving about where they are, and she's stolen these things, and she's sitting on top of them so nobody finds them. Just a great big ugly mess. And we sit and think, this is the person who God has chosen to give his blessing and his covenant to. This is God's chosen family of all the families in the world. This is who God selects. And we said, wait a minute, wow. God really can use and do whatever he wants. He is, thank you, Tim, he is sovereign. Boy, and we didn't really use that word so much through the book study, but really that's the underlying theme through all of these things. If God was not sovereign and able to bring to fruition whatever plan he chooses, then his plans would ultimately fail because he doesn't have the power to bring them about. But he is, and he does, and this was his plan. He says, I will choose these people for myself. I will give them a covenant that is unconditional, including how they behave towards me. And if they follow me, great, they'll get the blessing. But if they don't, I will still bless them. I will still use them as my chosen people. I might have to spank them and discipline them throughout the process, but I will still use them, and I will fulfill my purpose through them. Just as he's headed away back into the promised land, he's having to face Esau. He's running away from Jacob. His family's in disarray, and they're fighting, and they all hate each other. He's kind of at the end of his rope, I think, here. And we ended last time with the story of how Jacob fights God. And kind of metaphorically, this has been his entire life. He's been fighting against God. He's been doing things his own way. He's been jockeying for position and trying to manipulate and get things that he wants through deception. And financially, God's been blessing him, but he realizes he's exhausted and his life has fallen apart. And he wrestles God, and finally Jacob says, I won't let you go until you bless me. And God says, what is your name? He says, I am Jacob. I'm a deceiver. That's how I've been going through life. But now I'm face to face with you, and I'm finally going to confess who I really am. And God says, good. Your name will no longer, you will no longer be Jacob. You're no longer going to be a deceiver. That's not how you're going to go through life anymore. Now you're going to be Israel. Struggles with God. Not only struggles with God like against God, but struggles with God alongside of God against everybody else as well. So he changes his name, changes his character, and this is, in my opinion, where Jacob really starts to turn the corner here. He still messes up. He still does bad things. Don't get me wrong. But this is kind of the turning point in his life. Because for the first time ever, Jacob looks at God then and says, by the way, tell me your name. Who are you? And for the first time, Jacob takes interest in actually knowing who God is. For the first time in the entire biblical account, this is the time he does it. And God looks back at him and asks, why do you want to know my name? Are you really finally interested in knowing me personally? Do you really want to follow me for who I am and not just what I can give you? So he turns away and he leaves, and he starts to flee into the promised land. So Jacob's name is changed from the deceiver, Jacob, into Israel, struggles with God. The next several chapters, I'll just summarize quick. We're going to try to pick this up and move a little faster. I was at least hoping to have Genesis done by the end of the first quarter. This is the last Sunday of the quarter. That will not happen. However, in all fairness, I was cheated out of 3 Sundays. They brought in 2 special speakers, and I was sick last week, and so Randy's agreed to let me teach for 4 straight hours this morning to make up the time. Thanks, Randy. Appreciate that. And so we'll still... I'm just kidding. I wouldn't torture that way. In chapter 33, Jacob is still running away from Laban, but now he's facing Esau. He's just had this match with God, and he comes to confront Esau. And he comes across and he confronts him. Esau is much friendlier than he anticipated. Again, I'm sure that's God's providential blessing and protection upon him, because Esau no wonder wants to skin him alive, but he comes and it's a very friendly greeting. Jacob has divided everybody up into camps, or two main groups. And the thought is, if Esau with his 400 men attacks this group, at least that group can run away and be safe. And if he attacks that group, then this group can run away. So they'll only kill half of us, which is a brilliant, military plan. We'll only sustain 50% loss. But it's a friendly meeting, and they are kind of reunited, at least superficially, and nobody attacks and kills anybody. And that brings us to chapter 34. 34 gives us a reminder of who the brothers are. Jacob's kids, he has ultimately 12 children. I think it might have only been 11 at this point. I'm not sure Benjamin is born yet, if the stories are chronological. But the boys, we start to take a look at them. And chapter 34 is kind of an ugly picture of how the boys have become. They've learned their lesson well from Daddy the deceiver, Daddy the manipulator. And in this chapter, their sister, Dinah, she is abducted and raped by the local Canaanites. And they hear about it, and so they say, aha, we will fix you. And so the leader, the tribe leader of the Canaanites comes to them and says, I really, really like your daughter, Daddy Jacob. Will you give her to me to marry? I'll pay you the bride price, whatever it is, and I'll take her and I'll be super happy. And the brothers step up and say, oh, no, we can't do that, they say, because to us, God made a covenant with us that anybody in our family has to be circumcised. And so we can't give you our sister unless you're circumcised as well, because that would be obnoxious to us. And Dinah must have been really something, because he's willing to do this for her. He says, okay, if that's what it takes, I must have her. And so I myself will be circumcised. Everybody in my household, my entire entourage here will be circumcised. Every man will be circumcised, and then we can have Dinah. And so they all become circumcised. And I'm not going to go into the gory details of what's involved here, but once you're circumcised, you're kind of out of commission for a few days or a week or so. And the brothers wait until everybody's circumcised, and they're kind of hanging around not feeling so well. And they run and they attack, and the Canaanites are in no position to be putting up a fight, and they are all executed. And so the brothers use the circumcision not as a way of getting closer to God, but as a way of manipulating once again and attacking their enemies. And so they wipe out all of this family who is going to take their sister. And they come back, and the sister is saved. But in verse 30 of chapter 34, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you've brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land. Now they hate all of us because you've done this. Why would you do something like this? There are more of them than there are more of us. You've tricked them into incapacitating themselves, and then when they're down, you came and stabbed them and killed them all. Now they hate us. They've got connections. They're going to be after us. The Canaanites and the Perizzites. He says, my numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I will be destroyed, both I and my household. But they said, should they treat our sister like a prostitute? What are we supposed to do? We have to take revenge for ourselves, don't we? They mistreated us. We have to mistreat them in return. And so we lied to them, we tricked them, and we attacked them, and we killed them. Obviously, that's the right thing to do. And again, this is the family line that God has chosen to bless. Chapter 35, we see God reiterating his promise to Jacob. Right after this event, again, what are we to learn from these things? I think just a realistic picture of who Jacob was and who God is in terms of who he can choose to use. And I know sometimes here in church and Sunday school we say, well, God, if you're not following God and in his word and following him and obeying him, God cannot use you. And I think we say that in a well-meaning way, but I'm just not sure that's correct. I think God can use you no matter what. Now, it's definitely in your best interest if he uses you because you're following him, because of you instead of in spite of you. But God can use you no matter what to accomplish his purpose, whether you're working for him or not. And we see that throughout this passage here in chapter 34. So it's a really gritty, ugly story. 35, God reiterates his promise to Jacob. He says, get up, go back to Bethel, where you were before when you first saw me. Make an altar to me there. So he does that. And he sees this place. In verse 9, he says, God appeared to Jacob again, and when he came back from Paddan Aram, he blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. No longer shall you be Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. I thought he already said that earlier. Why does he say it again? Well, again, Jacob is still hanging on to his Jacoby ways. We can see that from chapter 34. And so just like all of us, it takes a while for Jacob to change his life. God had said before, you are now a new person. But just like all of us, it takes a while for him to change. So he reiterates this to Jacob again. So he called his name Israel, and God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you. Kings shall come from your own body. The land that I have given to Abraham and Isaac, I will now give to you. And I will give the land to your offspring after you. Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken to him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken to him out of the pillar of stone. So he reiterates the promise to him. Skip down to verse 22. Rachel dies, giving birth to Benjamin at this point. And then Isaac is about ready to die as well. And in verse 22 of chapter 35, it says, well, Israel lived in that land. Reuben, another gritty story. Reuben, the oldest son, he went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. More strife, more immorality within the family. Now the sons of Jacob were 12, and it names them all off there. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, and the list goes on. The sons of Rachel, he lists the two there. The sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, and he lists them all there. Verse 27, and Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, or Kirith Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac breathed his last, and he died and was gathered to his people, old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. And as far as I know, this is the last verse that mentions them doing something together. After this, they start to split. But it concludes God's chapter here because in chapter 36, verse 1, it says, these are, what does it say? These are the generations of. And so God kind of switches gears in the next chapter. But since we're at a dividing point here, again, I think it's worthwhile to take stock of kind of where we were. We've looked over just the last couple chapters. That's what they were about. But God has a promise to fulfill to Abraham, doesn't he? He keeps reminding every successive generation of that promise. So how has he done so far? As far as the land, how much does Jacob own so far? How much is actually his possession, as far as we know? As far as I know, there's one field still in the family line, isn't there? Grandpa Abraham bought it, and then Isaac, and passed on down to Jacob. As far as I know, it's still just that one field. How about the nation that God has promised to provide? How's he doing? Last time we said there was one son, Isaac. Now we're a generation later. How are we doing? Are we a nation yet? Not quite yet, but we're making progress, aren't we? We now have 12 sons and, I don't know how many daughters, at least one, Dinah. That's the one mentioned. How about the ultimate seed, the one that will come someday and fix all the problems and restore mankind and get rid of the sin problem? We really haven't heard much about that either, have we? So we have a ways to go in terms of fulfillment of God's covenant. But in chapter 36, we again kind of turn a corner. God shifts the emphasis from Isaac and Jacob and his family, and we go back to the other side of the family, Esau's side. Now, we've seen this happen before. Again, chapter 36 of Genesis. Not too often you can say, I heard a sermon on Genesis chapter 36 today. Because what is it? It's another boring genealogy of a bunch of people that we do not know, that have no meaning or relevance to us today whatsoever. Is that correct? And God kind of wasted his time in putting chapter 36 in here. He probably would have been better off if he'd have left it out. And if God had allowed us to be his editor the way he should have, we'd have helped him out and corrected his word for him. Why is chapter 36 here? It's interesting. My daughter Heather goes down to college in Iowa, Faith Baptist, and we went down to visit her one time, and she took us to her church that she often goes to, which coincidentally is is led by Danny Capon, who is Shirley Capon's grandson, who used to go here. But when we were down there visiting that one time, the one and only time I've ever been to this church, he did a full sermon on Genesis chapter 36. Of all the chapters, I mean, how do you make, and I saw the reference, so I looked it up and skimmed through here. I thought, what in the world is he going to do with Genesis chapter 36? And he actually did an absolutely brilliant job. In fact, so brilliant that I kept, he had handouts and notes and stuff, and I actually kept them and kept them in my Bible here for the longest time. By the way, just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, it fell out of my Bible somewhere here at church. If anybody comes across a page with highlighted notes on Genesis chapter 36, I'd really like it back because I don't know where that went, because I was keeping that because it was so good. But Genesis chapter 36, what's in here for us? Well, we know there's something in here for us because he put it in there for us to read. And even though it doesn't apply to us maybe in quite the same way it would have the first readers, Israelites in Moses' day, there's still something we can learn. So, Esau's chapter. These are the generations of Esau, 36 verse 1. That is Edom. And this chapter, God's chapter, is the shortest one in Genesis. It's only 8 verses long. Esau doesn't get a whole lot of time here. And again, why even mention it if you're not going to give it much time? Well, again, just like we've seen before when we've gone through the godly lines and the ungodly lines, the chosen lines and the not chosen lines, he's differentiating between the two. He says, this is how I treat and how I deal with my chosen people because I have a covenant with them. And here's how the lives of the non-chosen or not my chosen people turn out. There's a difference between the two, between my covenant and not my covenant. And there's a difference. And again, he's separating out and delineating between the two. So chapter 36, verse 1, these are the generations of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the Canaanites. Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite, and Basemath, Ishmael's daughter, is the sister of Nebaioth. And Adah bore to Esau Eliphaz, Basemath bore Ruel, Oholibamah bore Jeush, and Jalam and Korah. Are you all feeling inspired now? These are the sons of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. Verse 6. And then Esau took his wives, which were married from the surrounding Canaanites, his sons and his daughters, all the members of his household, his livestock, all his beasts, all his property that he had acquired in the land of Canaan, and he went into a land away from his brother Jacob, for their possessions were too great for them to dwell together. The land of their sojournings could not support them because of the livestock. Verse 8, so Esau settled in the hill country of Seir. And again he says, Esau is Edom. What do we see here going on? Now, think of this in terms of the book so far. What are we supposed to learn from this chapter that God put in here? What's going on? What are the characteristics of Esau, especially as opposed to his chosen people? We see Esau is taking wives from who? The surrounding Canaanites. Now, you remember Abraham was adamant. My son, my only chosen begotten son, the heir of the promise, is not to marry from the women here. They're to go back somewhere else. Isaac, same thing. Jacob, even though it was under dubious circumstances, Jacob, you get out of here and go back to your uncle and choose a wife back there. Esau, if you remember earlier, he says, I see that my Canaanite wives really take off my parents, so I'm going to marry more of them. Yes, indeed, I'm going to intermarry with all of these Canaanite women as much as I can. Is this a problem? I think that's a problem. Another thing he does, what does it say? I put the verse up there for you. Esau took his wives and sons, all of his stuff, which he got in the land of Canaan, and he went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob, or away. He went into a land away from his brother Jacob, NASB says. Why is that significant? Esau and Jacob, who were living within the land of promise that God said, I will give you this land. And Esau says, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to marry and immerse myself in the culture of the Canaanites, and then I'm going to pick myself up and move to where? Somewhere else, outside of the land of promise. I'm going to remove myself from the land, and I'm going to remove myself from the lineage of the family. And in essence, what he's doing is saying, I'm going to distance myself from everything that this family stands for, and I'm going to choose instead to be one of the Canaanites. And it says 2 times here, it kind of bookends it. In verse 1, these are the generations of Esau, and he says that is Edom. He's making sure that we understand that these are the same. You can call him Red or you can call him Harry. Either one, he answers the same thing. But I think there's more to it than that, because in the end of verse 8, the end of his chapter, again, it goes out of his way to say Esau is Edom. Why does it say this? Because in future generations, they're going to become known as the Edomites, right? The Edomites. And we're to understand that the Edomites come from Esau, the splitting off, the brother who said, I want to distance myself from this covenant and not embrace it. Whew. Everybody okay so far? So we have Esau, from whom come the Edomites. And he goes into, it says in verse 8, he settled in the hill country of Seir. So the Edomites are living in the same place and intermingling with the descendants of Seir. And so he moves into this land of them, and together they start to kind of melt and merge a little bit, and they live together in what they call the hill country of Seir. Everybody understand? We're keeping that in mind? Because Genesis does something a little bit unusual. He gives Esau what? What does verse 9 say? These are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in the hill country of Seir. I thought Esau just had a chapter. Why does he get two in a row? Why does God take yet another division and give two back-to-back to Esau? What's he doing? Think with me here for a minute. Put those little brain cells in gear. The first one says these are the generations of Esau, the person, the individual, and here's what he did. What does the second one say? These are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites. So this one is, the first one was Esau himself. The second one is the extended family, successive generations of who Esau becomes. The first one is looking at Esau the guy. The second one puts on the binoculars and looks down through the generations and says, because of what Esau did in verses 1 through 8, here's who he becomes, and here where his family goes in future generations and on moving forward. So that's this chapter. Again, it's a bunch of names. We're not going to go through all of them. But just a few things to point out here, and it's, I think, what we're supposed to take away from this passage. These are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in the hill country of Seir, where he moved away from the promise. Okay? These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, the wife of Esau; Reuel, the son of Bethamus. The sons of Eliphaz were Timah and Omar, a bunch of stuff. Verse 12, Timnah was a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bore Amalek and Eliphaz. These are the sons of Adah's wife, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Reuel, and a whole bunch of them. Verse 14, these are the sons of Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon, Esau's wife. She bore to Esau a bunch of people. Verse 15, these are the chiefs of the sons of Esau. Okay, these are the leaders that came from Esau's tribe. The sons of Eliphaz, born to Esau, blah, blah, chiefs of Timon, Omar, Zophar, blah, 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 a bunch of people. These are the chiefs of Eliphaz from the land of Edom. These are the sons of Adah. These are the sons of Reuel, a whole bunch of names there. These are the sons of Oholibamah, Esau's wives. And so it goes through each of the different wives of Esau's and gives their sons and the chiefs and the leaders that came from their families. And then it concludes in verse 19. These, what we just listed, are the sons of Esau, that is Edom. Again, he emphasizes that, and these are their chiefs. Verse 20, these are the sons of Seir, the Horite. Wait a minute. I thought we were talking about Esau and his descendants in this chapter. Why are we splitting it in half and giving half to the descendants of Esau, but half to the descendants of Seir? Why are we doing this? In fact, all the other chapters where it says these are the descendants of, they've at least been the descendants of, at least since Abraham, descendants of that family. Here we're taking a tribe totally unrelated to the Jews whatsoever, but we're giving them time and space in this chapter. Why? Why do we care? Look up on the screen. What's going on? Because the two are starting to what? Come together as one. Yeah. These are the sons of Seir the Horite, the inhabitants of the land, and it gives a whole bunch of names. And again, I will not read through all those names. Thank you very much. You're welcome. But a couple of them that I do want to point out. Look at chapter 36, verse 22. It says, the sons of Lotan were Hori and Heman. Lotan's sister was Timnah. And as we read through this, and I know I skimmed through it fast, but we say, wait a minute, I've seen that name before, Timnah. Where have I seen the word Timnah? Oh, wait, it's back in verse 12. Timnah, in verse 12, was a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son. She bore Amalek to Eliphaz. And so the daughter of the Horite is now marrying into the sons of Esau. And look down at verse 25. It says, these are the children of Anah, Dishon and Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah. Oholibamah, that name sounds familiar too. Look back at verse 14. These are the sons of Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon, Esau's wife. So we see names from the Seir tribe showing up in Esau's family line. And we see names from Esau's family line showing up in the Seir tribe. How does this happen? Again, they're intermixing, they're intermingling. Remember what God told the Israelites when they came back into the land? He said, one of the things you must not do is what? Intermarry with the people. You must not take their daughters for your sons or give your daughters to their sons. This cannot happen, or else you will lose who you are. You will lose my promise. You'll turn away from me. And you as a heritage, as a family, as a covenant people will be dissolved, destroyed. You will disappear. And that's exactly what God is showing us here in this passage. Esau has said, I want to move out of the land. I want to totally assimilate myself into these pagan Canaanite tribes so that I soon become indistinguishable. My family and theirs, they will be so interconnected that they are now considered one. So much so that when I give the genealogy in the last half of chapter 36, they're impossible to separate. I have to present both of them to you because they've become now one. And that's what's happened to Esau, who's rejected my covenant. He's run away. He would rather become a Canaanite than be associated with me in my covenant. Oh, how depressing and how sad. Verse 31, these are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the Israelites. And so Esau is taking the fast track to becoming a kingdom. And that was part, Esau, he's a son of Isaac and Abraham and Isaac as well. And so he's becoming nations as well. And he's becoming a nation much faster, isn't he? Because he has a whole bunch of kings before any king ever reigned over Israel. Bela, the son of Beor, blah, 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 and all the way down. I'm not going to read all the names. Get to verse 43, a couple more names. These are the chiefs of Edom, that is Esau. Again, emphasis there. The father of Edom, according to their dwelling places in the land of their possession. So Esau now has totally separated himself from the covenant, from the land, from the family, everything. He's now become a Seirite, living in the hill country of Seir. And the Edomites and the sons of Seir have become one and the same. And for all practical purposes, theologically speaking, they've dissolved themselves and they disappear. Now, he's still in the biblical record, but in terms of being a member of the chosen family of God, he no longer is. He's been dissociated by his own initiative. How sad. But God's chapter ends with one more verse, doesn't it? In our Bibles, it's called chapter 37, verse 1. So it looks like the chapter division happens there. But in God's divisions, look at verse 2. These are the generations of. God's chapter includes 37:1 in with the previous chapter. How does God end his chapter? Jacob, however, lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. Again, why end a chapter that way? That's all about Esau and what he did. He's doing what? Once again, he's comparing the two side by side. We're supposed to see this delineation going on here. While Esau is dissociating himself and running away into a different land, to a different people, and living in their culture, worshiping their gods and their everything, Jacob is still living in the land of promise. I'd say following God under his direction. That's not entirely true. But at least he is still in the land of promise, and God will be continuing to work through him. Everybody okay? Now, isn't chapter 36 more interesting than you thought? Oh, I wish you could have been there to hear that sermon down there, because he did a way better job than I did. But it's still fascinating. Chapter 37, verse 2. Again, God turns his attention back to Jacob and his family, and he spends the rest of the book looking at Jacob and his family. So here we go. These are the generations of Jacob. And we start to zero in on one brother kind of versus the others. And again, I think we're supposed to compare side by side. Not that the other brothers are now going to be dissociated from the promise, because from here on out, all of the sons and all of the children inherit the promise. Unlike before, where it was one or the other. But again, that doesn't mean that the whole family has become godly and God-fearing and moral and upright and upstanding and all that stuff. That is not the case. And so we see some of them choose to follow God more closely, and some of them choose not to do so. Joseph, being 17 years old, verse 2, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. And you know the story. I'm not going to dwell on it super heavily because I think you know the story as well. Joseph becomes the favorite. He gets a robe of many colors. His brothers don't like him all that well because he's being shown favoritism. Clearly, Daddy Jacob did not take any parenting classes or anything like that because he's running his family pretty horribly, to be honest. In verse 5, Joseph has a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. And they said to him, "Hear this dream that I've dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and my sheaf arose and stood upright. And look, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said, "Are you indeed going to reign over us? You're going to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told them to his brothers and said, "Behold, I've dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars are bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow down ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his fathers kept the saying in mind. Two dreams going on here, and this is how we first start learning about who Joseph is. Now, what was Joseph's mindset in telling his brothers this? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think the Bible says. Some people say he was just honestly relaying these revelations that God had given to him, and the response by the brothers took him totally by surprise. I mean, why do you hate me for this? I'm just telling you what God showed me. I mean, what's so wrong about God giving me a dream saying that you're all going to be subservient to me and bow down to me, since I am the next to youngest, or, you know, I'm the next youngest, or however it felt, one of the younger ones anyway, son of all of it. What's wrong with you bowing down to me? The other theory says Joseph is kind of like so many other brothers in the family. He likes to irritate the older siblings a little bit, and he says, "Hey guys, let me put on my fancy coat while I tell you what dream God gave me. Guess what happened in my dream? You guys all came and bowed down to me. How do you like that? And then I had another dream, sun, moon, and stars, and you bowed down to me again. What do you think of that? And maybe he's just being a bratty little brother. Which was it? I have no idea. I don't think the Bible says. Why does the Bible not tell us this crucial information? Why does it not tell us this crucial information? Probably because it's not crucial information. Yeah. So we don't know. We don't know. But apparently that's not relevant to the story because God didn't tell us. But something that is relevant here is what we see, that God has chosen this guy, and he has given him two dreams. And in this dream, he said, if I can paraphrase and use a different passage, every knee will bow before you, and every tongue will confess that you are in charge of us. And if that passage sounds familiar, keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to kind of keep building on that theme a little bit. But we get down to verse 11, and his brothers were jealous of him. They hated him for it. They couldn't stand this little twerp of a kid. They just wanted to pound his face. But his father, after chewing him out, he kept the saying in mind. Or can I rephrase that just a little bit? He pondered these things in his heart. Does that sound familiar to anybody else? To us, from our perspective, from all the scriptures that we have, that sounds a little bit familiar. Now, in the time Moses wrote it, they obviously couldn't have made the link yet because the other half hadn't been presented to them yet. But what does that sound like? Somebody hears this message of who somebody is, that they will have great power and be very influential and be used by God, and they keep these things in their mind, or they ponder all these things in their heart. Who does that sound like? Yeah, sounds kind of like Mary, doesn't it? In Luke chapter 2, verse 19, I won't cross-reference it, but you can do that the same if you want. God comes and gives a message to Mary and says, Mary, this son you're going to have, he's going to be, he's the chosen one. And he gives her this message, and it says, she ponders all these things in her heart. She keeps them in the back of their mind. She says, I'm not quite sure how this is going to play out, but I believe what God says, and I'm going to think about this one a while. I'm not going to forget this, and I'm just going to see how God plays this out. And it's almost the same verbiage that God uses here for Jacob in chapter 37. And if God is using this verbiage here in chapter 37, applying to Joseph, And we, at least from our perspective, because we have the New Testament, start to see similarities that we see play out later on. Let's keep that theme in mind as we read through the book of Joseph, okay? Joseph is sold by his brothers. You know the story again. I'm not going to read it all to all of you. But he goes out to the field to check on his brothers. Papa Jacob sends him out. I don't know if he's wearing his fancy coat or not, but his brothers look off in the distance. Here comes Joseph. Hey, here comes that twerp. We hate him. We'd really rather not see him anymore. What should we do? So they can have a little powwow. Hey, let's kill him. They finally become convinced, let's not just outright kill him. Let's just throw him in this pit and make him suffer for a while. So they throw him in the pit. They beat him up, I'm sure, a little bit for a while. Reuben walks away, who seemed to be willing to save him and bring him back to Papa because he was the most responsible. But while he's gone, these Ishmaelites come by. Everybody remember who Ishmaelites are, right? Descendants of Ishmael, who would have been their grandpa's brother. So these are like third or fourth or whatever cousins, okay, is who comes by. And they're headed off to Egypt. They're slave traders. They say, hey, distant cousins, we have a treat for you. How would you like to have another slave to sell in Egypt, going for half price today? Yeah, great. And so they pull him up out of the pit and they sell him off, and off Joseph goes into Egypt. He's been betrayed by his brothers, sold for a few pieces of silver, and off he goes into a foreign land. And as he's headed off, we see that in verse 38, the Midianites had sold him into Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, and he gets a job down there in Egypt. At this point, which seems really weird, God interrupts his own story with chapter 38. And he pauses Joseph for a second, and he tells a story not of what happens next to Joseph, that's in chapter 39, but he tells a story of what is going on at home with the brothers back in chapter 38. It seems almost a little bit discontiguous, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to really fit real well. But let's review the story here, and maybe we can figure out what's going on. Chapter 38, again, it's another gritty, kind of ugly story of who the brothers are and how they behave. I will not I won't read the whole story to you, but the summary is that Judah, one of the leader brother, mostly you hear about either Reuben or Judah, right? Reuben's the oldest, and Judah seems to be the instigator of stuff. And so Judah, kind of representative maybe of the other brothers, he has a son. The son gets married. The son is so wicked, the Bible doesn't say why or how or what he did, so wicked that God said, you're dead, and he kills him. Tradition at that time was if the one son dies without any offspring, the next son marries that wife, has children with her, and that way the family line continues. So the next son comes in. I'm not entirely sure why, but this son says, I refuse to let her have any of my kids and continue on the line. Maybe they didn't like each other, maybe he's just being obnoxious, I don't know. But he said, I refuse to give her any children. And so God said, fine, you're dead too. Out they go. Judah has a third kid. He's much younger, too young to marry. And so he tells this woman, he says, look, you can have my third son too, but he's not quite old enough to marry. And so why don't you go back to your dad's house, live until he's old enough for you to marry, and then you can have him, then you can, have your kids, and the family line will resume. Deep down in his mind, he's thinking what? We can see from later on in the story, in reality, he had absolutely no intention of giving the third son, regardless of how old he gets. Probably he's thinking, look, I gave her my last two boys, and they ended up dead. I don't know what she's putting in her chili, but something's going on here, and I don't want to lose another son. So ain't no way she's getting my third son. So I'll have her move back home. Maybe she'll move on with life, but whatever. She's not getting my third kid. Third kid grows up. He gets older. She realizes she's never getting the kid. She says, I deserve to have a family line here. He is cheating me out of my lineage, my heritage, my offspring. So she says, I know what I will do. So she waits until Papa Judah goes on a trip. And she finds out where he's going. She changes clothes, and she runs ahead of him. She stands alongside of the road at some Canaanite shrine or whatever it was, dresses up like a shrine prostitute, which is always a great idea, right? Along comes Judah. He's had a long, hard day. He sees the prostitute standing alongside the road. He says, hey, this looks like fun. This will be a good time. He says, hey, why don't we, go do the whole prostitute thing? What will you give me? Well, I will give you a young goat. Fine, give me the goat, and we'll go have some fun. I don't have the goat with me. My pockets are too small. It doesn't fit in my pocket. Well, I need something. How do I know I can trust you? Here, take my seal and my staff. Why a seal and a staff? Highly identifiable. That'd be like saying, fine, as a pledge, give me your driver's license, and I don't know, what else is if you have a hat that you always wear and everybody knows it's your hat, or something like that. Something that everybody, when they see it, they know it is yours. So he hands over his driver's license, his identifying seal, and his staff, which everybody knows is his. Fine, this way I know that you'll actually send me a goat. Okay, that's good enough. They go in and they do their thing. Judah comes out, he's on his way. The next day, he gets back to the flock. He says, hey, send this goat to this lady. I owe her a goat. Why do you owe her a goat? Never mind why I owe her a goat. Just go give her a goat. Okay. So they show up. There's no lady. Where's the lady? People around say, what are you talking about? What lady? Well, the prostitute that's here. There's been no prostitute here. What are you talking about? What's going on? Oh, well, they say, I guess I just saved myself a goat. I tried. Stupid woman. She probably forgot all about it by now anyway. Tamar's already gone back to her home. She's already gone back to the home, and so Judah comes back home as well. 3 months go by. Somebody says, oh, Papa Judah, you remember Tamar? You never liked her very well anyway. She killed your first 2 sons. Guess what? She's pregnant. Oh, says Judah, this is my chance. Bring her out. We're going to kill her. We're going to burn her for her immorality. This will show her, and this will solve my problem as well. Now I never have to give her to my son. Bonus. So they bring her out, and they get ready to light the match. It says, final word before I die, please. Okay, fine, final word. I would like to reveal the father of who my child is, and it is whoever owns this seal and the staff. And everybody looks at it and says, oh, I know whose that is. That's Judah's. And Judah sees it as well, and he says, oh, I'm humiliated, I'm embarrassed, fine, I'll confess, you're more righteous than me, fine, you can live. And so he kind of takes her, but she never has, it says, he never knew her again, in other words. She lived with him, but they were never a couple again. And so we can see how this all plays out. Deception, immorality, more deception, more immorality, more lying, more manipulation. A really gritty, ugly picture. And again, we've stopped in the middle of the Joseph narrative. We've turned our attention to chapter 38, which is a gritty, ugly, immoral, yucky kind of story of the other brothers, representative of who they are and how they're behaving back home, while poor little Joseph is off being a slave in Egypt, where the wicked brothers have betrayed and sold the righteous brother who has come to them. And we can see their behavior. That brings us to chapter 39. Chapter 39 is a much more familiar story, isn't it? But I think 38 and 39 are put back to back very much for a reason. Because while we see in chapter 38, we see Judah, representative of the other brothers, he has all the power. I mean, he is obviously in control of things. He has his own flock. He has his own family. He's established there in the area. He has a degree of control and power, but he lives by manipulation, and he gets what he wants. He's learned the family traits well, hasn't he? He's picked things up from Jacob and from his mamas and his mama's co-wives and all that kind of thing. And he lives by trickery and manipulation just like his dad had. And he acts according to his ability. Whatever he can get is what he tries to get. And whatever he wants, he has the ability to get. If he has the ability to get it, he tries to get it. And that's the picture of Judah. What do you think of Judah? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Great guy, not so great guy? Probably not so great a guy. But again, chapter 38 shows up right beside chapter 39. And chapter 39 is what's going on in Egypt with Joseph. But before I tell you what these two have in common and how the parallels line up, the clock says we're out of time. So, since Randy was only kidding about a 4-hour Sunday school, as much as I would enjoy that, Pastor might get irritated with me.
I dare you.
All right. Randy gave the go-ahead. All right, we're doing it. No.
I got to end the live stream.
Okay. Sorry, live streamers. You're going to miss 3 hours of... No. All right, we'll continue this next week. But think this week about what in the world chapter 38 has to do with chapter 39, and we'll continue next week. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you again for these stories. They aren't just empty stories of meaningless names and irrelevant characters. These are all things that you're using to show us who you are and how you work through people. when the people work with you and they follow you and you bless them, or whether they work against you and sometimes you bless them and sometimes you don't. But either way, they need to come to you. Thank you for showing us all these things of who you are and how you relate to us and who we are and how we relate to you, and help us to pick up on these things that you put here for us in these stories. In Jesus' name, amen. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Thank you very much. You are dismissed.